Welcome to Regis World Literature. This is lesson 25, and we're continuing our discussion on French literature. This is a very cursory overview of French literature, as I'm sure you're aware of. We've been marching through each of the periods in just one lecture, so each, a brief lecture, okay? And now we've talked about Romanticism in the 1800s, the early half of the 1800s. We are talking about the period, the Romantic period, and then we talk about the Realism period, and growing out of the Realism period is a Naturalism period. Now, Naturalism tends to be kind of a subset, sometimes is viewed, we'll look at it as a different period, but in many ways it can be viewed as a subset of realism. Now, some of the characteristics of naturalism, I'm going to read then from the text for a minute. From the 1860s on, critics increasingly speak of literary naturalism. The expression is imprecise and was frequently used disparagingly to characterize authors whose chosen subject matter was taken from the working classes and who portrayed the misery and harsh conditions of real life. Now, we also view realism as incorporating that, as we've been talking about the ills of society. But when we get kind of down into what we could call the dregs, the harshest conditions, maybe the unsavory aspects, more and more. We talked a little bit about that crime element too, but when we get into this aspect of society, then we tend to start using the term naturalism. Again, it's not a precise term. Many of the naturalist writers took a radical position against the excesses of Romanticism and strove to use scientific and encyclopedic precision in their novels. Now, I would say maybe the one of the largest characteristics of naturalism is it goes to a philosophy of naturalism as opposed to a personal involved God or the idea of sovereignty. So we're having a philosophy of naturalism behind it, meaning that we're thinking about the forces of heredity, of environment. Not that these things aren't true, but without any view of the supernatural or of a personal God. Okay, natural processes could be a way we could think of the way this is, naturalism is developing in literature. Natural processes as the focus, scientific processes, okay. Let's see. The author that we would most want to associate in French literature with this period would be Emile. I'm doing the best I can with pronunciation. I apologize again. Zola, it's either Zola or Zula. I've kind of seems to be pronounced both ways. And it says in which, it's most often associated with his works. I'm not going to actually include a novel name, but the social success or failure of two branches of a family is explained in this group of novels. It's called a novel cycle, with several different titles, in which two branches of a family, their success and failure is explained by physical, social, and hereditary laws. And I think that points out one of the other ideas about naturalism. Okay, we're thinking of natural processes or natural, hereditary, social, see how these things are fitting in, laws. Okay. When I think of naturalism in American literature. I think of Stephen Crane's work, Red Badge of Courage, in which that brief novel has a lot of nature imagery in it, but nature is not like it would have been to the Romantics, typically something very friendly, very much you're personally engaged with, very subjective and benign. Instead, it's the harsh reality exhibited, for instance, as he's sitting in that, what he seems to be this beautiful little idyllic church in nature, quote unquote, with the trees all about him, beautiful scene, and then all of a sudden he sees the old dead carcass of a man with the ants crawling in and out of the orbits of the eye. And so this would be an indication of naturalism, probably a good visual picture of naturalism. Nature, yes, but harsh. You're learning from it. Maybe survival of the fittest, dog-eat-dog type perspective. Okay, so anyway, we're going to talk about this novel's cycle here. And he is the author you want to associate with naturalism in French literature. Now we'll take about one more group here. This is the Parnassus period, or the Parnassian period. I would say that naturalism, the Parnassus period, and symbolism are all occurring at the same time, about the last quarter of the 1800s. Okay, so this is a period or a development of literary style, again, in the last quarter of the 1800s, that is about poetry. It concerns poetry primarily. And its probably fundamental characteristics are rigidity of form and emotional detachment, very different than the Romantic period. Maybe the opposite, actually, where they were experimenting with a lot of fluidity and variety of form and definitely emotional engagement. Says it's elements of which echo the philosophical work of Arthur Schopenhauer. So, and his aesthetic theories, that would be aesthetic theories, troubling with my words here, are theories about what makes for the beautiful, or what makes for the best forms and appeals in any realm of art, artistic expression, whether that be writing or music or visual art. Okay. Now, it says, so you don't have to know his name. Okay, it says modern science and geography were united with romantic adventure. So this is kind of a parenthesis. Maybe he would have more gone under the realm of the naturalism, though I don't really see him that much as a naturalist writer myself. But anyway, it's so you've got science, that's where you're getting that naturalism, modern science and geography, which would be characteristics of naturalism, combine with romantic adventure, which would tend to harken back to the Romantic period, in the works of Jules Verne. Okay. So I guess we're going to call him a naturalist. This is the period of time he's writing in. So this is not related to the Parnasse. The Parnasse is strictly poetry. Okay. And but let's see, give you a couple of titles for him, because as you are trying to seek to read another author, perhaps you're going to choose another French book to read for this quarter. I would highly recommend, if you've never read anything by Jules Verne, that you would enjoy doing that. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea would be a good title, or Around the World in 80 Days, Journey to the Center of the Earth. All three of those are Jules Verne. I'm hoping that I recorded this about Jules Verne, but I'm going to repeat it just in case I did not talk about this earlier. I better repeat this whole half. I'm a little unclear. I apologize if this is repetition. Okay, Parnassus, this is a period of literature that concerns poetry. We have a rigidity of form and emotional detachment. Notice how different these two characteristics are from the Romantic poetry, which would have lots of experimentation and variety of form and definitely emotional engagement. So Parnasse refers to, or Parnassian refers to, a style developing at the same time as naturalism. So there's three groups that are stemming out of the realism period: naturalism, Parnasse, and symbolism. We're talking about naturalism, we did, and now we're talking about Parnasse. Okay, we'll talk about symbolism next time, but these are the characteristics. We're not asking you to know any of the authors associated with that right now. Now, then I'm going to make some specific comments about the author Jules Verne. Jules Verne is another author. We would consider him a naturalist, though it's funny because I don't really think of him too much in that direction. But because of this reason, he takes the science, the geography, that emphasis on new learning and the excitement of that, and all of the new science and discovery that's being explored in the second half of the 1800s, and he combines it with romantic adventure, so he really develops somewhat of his own genre. It's a very popular writer. He wrote and published his novels in serial form, as did so many of them in this period, and it would almost be considered early science fiction. I would say that's a good way to describe this. It's almost a precursor to the science fiction genre of the early 20th century. Now, I'm bringing him up in particular because if you are looking for another French book to read, especially for perhaps your extra credit, here would be several titles by him. If you've never read anything by Jules Verne, I would say he's pretty delightful and easy read, and you should be exposed to him. So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Journey to the Center of the Earth, what would be another world? Around the World in 80 Days. These would be three good examples. So we're touching a little bit of what I would call late 19th century science woven into this, and I think that's where they pick up the term naturalism and apply it to him. Not super typical of your naturalist writing, okay? But really, I think it's really almost a precursor to science fiction would be a better way to view him. But anyway, I mentioned those because, again, I'd want you to know these titles, but also that you might want to go ahead and read one of his works. And I think that will be all we'll talk about today in French literature.